So after a 2-week hiatus of recording, where Skip and I ran around with our heads cut off and dealt with intense stress of dealing with multiple conferences and vacations and demos, like it's kicked up around here, but that means that we drop a ball. And that's okay. We've actually have a whole podcast on how to drop the right ball.
There we go.
So thank you everyone for having a 2-week off period where Skip and I were able to get a grip on reality. And
whose idea was it to do back-to-back conferences?
I think it was Sebastian's.
Oh, there we go. Yes, that was it. It was his.
You throw him under the bus.
That's right. It was Sebastian's idea.
Yeah, it's Sebastian's idea to do back-to-back conferences. I haven't had a normal week since mid-February.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
And this all comes down to this episode of MSP Personas, the CFO, which I promised to push out 2 weeks ago, is that one of the things that people think that CFOs do all day is finance. That's not exactly true. CFOs are closer to a CRO than anything else. They deal with risk. They deal with risk management, strategic design, when to hire people. It just so happens that a large amount of that is wrapped up in finance. And so you have a CFO. And it's fun for me to see people like when they pretend to be a CFO, they're like, oh, now I'm going to be an accountant. No, stop. You're going to do risk management. We actually have an entire webinar on CFOs. If you look at our history here, we had a great webinar about 2 or 3 years ago where we brought in a CFO to talk to people about what does it actually mean. Like they're more concerned about how are people handling employment? How is hiring practices going?
Yes. And that whole discussion was
numbers all day.
Yeah. And that whole discussion was way less spreadsheet focused than you might think, because it's not just about, the numbers on a spreadsheet. That is a big part of the life, but it means so much more there. I mean, if you talk to a CFO, yes, they may look at spreadsheets all day long, but they're looking at the information surrounding that and what that does to those numbers, or what those numbers allow them to impact outside of, that spreadsheet, what everything's going around. And that's the bigger picture that CFOs are focused on.
I just put a big analogy into my head. CFOs care about transactional accounting as much as you care about ticket management. Okay. Both are important. It is important to manage tickets and manage SLAs. That is a very critical function of what you do. However, your job is so much more. As an engineer, tickets are a way to stay organized. It's a way to kind of track the lifeblood of what's going on. But what you are is so much more. You're designing and architecting out solutions. And the tickets are just a small part of your job. It'd be like somebody walking in and say, oh, you're an engineer, you fix computers. It's an oversimplification. If you walk into a CFO and say, oh yeah, you deal with accounting and finance, and they just smile and nod their head and realize that you're probably not somebody they want at the table.
Yep.
If you want to earn a table, you've got to go to the CFO and you got to talk to them like they want. You got to give them the information that they want. If you walk in there with a quote and hand it to the CFO, unless he or she requested it, they're going to be like, okay, so how does this play into risk management? How does this play into our overarching financial strategy? And if you don't have that piece snapped in, that paper goes over to the side of the desk and it sets down on top of all the other quotes they have to look through. Yep. And it's a big pile. You could even look at them, watch them. If you're in their office with them, watch them set the paper down. They'll move it over.
Oh, I've seen that many times.
Box.
Yep. And you go back into that office a while later, and that paper is still right there. Maybe a few more on top of it. Maybe you see your corner sticking out of the edge of the stack, but it hasn't been touched. It hasn't been worked with.
If it's a larger client, there will be a purchasing department that it'll head over to, or a accounting department will head over to. But if you're dealing with small businesses, most small businesses, when they have their CFO hat on, they're still learning finance as well. And they're going to pick that up and they're going to set it aside. The reason why it feels like a CFO is an accountant is because your clients, usually they're the same thing. They're the controller, the CFO, the accountant are all wrapped into one seat, just like at your MSP. You're wearing multiple hats. You've got different personas yourself. Maybe you're the COO and the CFO at your MSP. Maybe you're a small shop and you wear all three hats. That's good. But understand there's three distinct roles there. Just like we talked about with like the CEO and his CISO, there are two distinct roles there, and you have to switch your hat so that you can handle things appropriately. Otherwise, your wires get crossed and you start confusing ideas. And then you start projecting those ideas on others.
Yep.
That's why in the MSP industry, often people see the CIO role and the engineering role as the same, or that they see a business analyst role and the CIO role as the same. It's because in the MSP world, they largely are the same role because you're not big enough to define out the personas. In the corporate
but they
world,
still
if you look
exist.
at it, you'll see those personas be very distinct and their roles and responsibilities are set.
Yeah. Now, I've got a great example that I've brought out a few times. It was a real epiphany moment for me, but this is not very practical for hardly anybody out there. All right. But this is a great example of how the end result is what really drives a lot of finance decisions. So I'm working for a pretty large oil and gas company, and we are leveraging a contractor that is working out of one of our divisional offices. And we're running him around all these different sites. He's doing all these things. He's in what we were calling at the time the telecom unit, so a lot of Cisco gear. And we were using him so much, and I really liked this contractor. I was like, hey, let's just hire this guy. I'm seeing the invoices come through. We're paying a lot of money for this guy. And we can give him a really nice raise and bring him in-house, make him a full-time employee, all the benefits, pay him, again, well more than what he was making. And the cost of the company would be less than what we were spending, significantly less.
Yeah.
And so we start down that path. I mean, we need the resource, all the justifications. But we ended up getting denied on this, and I was frustrated. And so, we dive into why. And for those of you who've done oil and gas, you know that financing and how they fund stuff, every hole in the ground has a different set of investors, basically. And the long story short on this one is every time we sent him out to a location, his pay, the cost of his time, was being accounted for against that small group of investors. He could literally drive a mile down the road, work at a different location, and would be paid from a different fund. So the company looked back and said, if we bring this guy on, then we're going to have to absorb his cost as an operational expense for the company versus just a cost of doing business expense that we share with all of our investors. All right. So, it made sense for me, but I don't remember the exact numbers, but we were going to be able to pay him for like a fourth or a fifth of what we were paying the contracting firm to hire him out. So this is no small amount of dollars. This is a lot of money. But the organization, because it served our overall goals, we decided to spend more money because it better served our needs. It better served our objectives.
Yeah.
And that is, what's that?
So there's a larger picture.
There was a larger picture. And that plays significantly in a lot of finance decisions. And so you have to be involved in that process so that you can align what you're doing with that end goal. All right. Now, I'm the contractor in there. I'm gonna make sure they know, hey, we're breaking this out. I'll provide you all the details. So your investor billing is super simple, right? That's a value I can add, and I can make a lot of money. On the other end of that, I just have to work with it and deal with those situations. So you have to know what it is they're going to do with this money and how it affects them if you want to get involved in the finance discussion.
It's a scoping problem. So to relate it to engineers a little bit better, so if some of you are still confused of what Skip's talking about here, like if you ever had like a level 1 tech, why can't I just plug this cable in? It's simple. I just gotta put it here, and I could save money if I could just use blue cables. I've got 1,000 of them here. Why do I have to go to Gray Bar or wherever and buy these different color cables? why do I need to buy, solid core, like whatever the question is, but to the tier one tech, they don't understand why you're making them expend more money and more time to do a simple job. You as an engineer have learned a few lessons. Structured cabling standards are important. Maybe you didn't think that first in your career, but I guarantee you, if you're 5 years in, you know darn well that structured cabling matters.
Color coding is important.
It is important. There was this in one of the Facebook groups recently. There was a guy asking. He was just a VoIP guy. He's just trying to plug in phones. He's like, "How do I connect two switches together?" And like, just plug the cable in. And I said, "If you're asking that," he says, "Is there a certain port?" And I said, "Well, if you're asking that question, I'm just going to ask you to please use port 1 and a yellow cable."
There.
Now, there's going to be people who say, no, the actual structured cabling says you need to do orange, or if you're doing crossover, red. That's okay. All I'm trying to get this guy to do is follow basic standards here, people. So that the next poor guy who has to come in there and manage that switch at least knows where the cable is. And so and to him, it probably makes no sense that I want him to use a different color cable and to put it into port 1. It doesn't make any sense. It physically absolutely means nothing on the transport layer, but there's a bigger picture. Yep. And that's the way the CFO looks at the world. They're balancing out, in any C-level for that matter, they're balancing out a larger picture, especially at the corporate world. There's a reason why they make so much money. They're looking across multiple risks and profit drivers at the corporation, trying to figure out what makes the most sense so you don't have to think about it. You have to trust that their brain is good. Now, maybe they're incompetent. Well, the CEO's job is to make sure that they're not incompetent. There's a balance there. But you have to remember, just because it doesn't make sense to you, the CFO says, you know what, we're not going to do that. And you're like, that guy's an idiot. Is he an idiot, or do you just not understand things? Just like your tech thinks you're an idiot because you keep yelling at him about not using the correct cabling. The guy's a jerk. He just keeps making me do my work over again. Yes, because you got bad crimps, and I have to figure out that problem when they break into
crosstalk coming off all of your patch cables. So, but I think so when we run into these challenges. So we'll take something kind of specific here. You got a quote, you're trying to get it approved, and you just they keep just shutting you down. I think many times our first response is, the price is too much. All right. And so that becomes our default management tool is, I'll just, we'll figure out a way to cut the price. Maybe I can drop my margins. Maybe I can, go to the vendor and get a price deviation, whatever. It may not have anything to do with the price. It may be how it fits into their overall picture. So don't be so quick to give up your profit margins before you understand the problem. Yeah. There could be ways where, if you're this contractor in this example I was talking about, you may want to increase your prices because hey, I increase my prices and I can structure it this way to fit your needs. Is that okay? And the client's going, yeah. At the end of the day, sometimes they don't really care. Not all the time, but sometimes they don't really care what it costs, but more what it can do for them.
Also, I want to back up and go off something you said there. Is you can increase costs and overcome a barrier. And that does not sound intuitive. But for nonprofits, that's a lot of times the case. So if you're trying to fight the cash flow issue with a nonprofit, you've got an uphill battle. They're going to want to squeeze the cash flow issue down as far as they can. But you're taking a $40,000 project and you're trying to squeeze it into a month-to-month stream, not going to work well. Now, take that same $40,000 project and say, hey, for $80,000, we can do these 20 things for you. That's going to result in this and cost savings next year. Now you think that's not intuitive. They couldn't afford 40. Why would they be able to afford 80? Because now you've crossed a barrier. You cross that $50,000 line or whatever the line is, because their donor is going to get tapped now. Now they switch their mindset. The CFO switches their mindset from cash flow to grants, to lump sums. And that's a different game for a CFO. And if you're coming to this podcast wanting to learn about P&L and balance sheets and all that stuff, no, that's not what this is about. We're talking about is the persona. What does this person in this seat care about? And in this situation, they are caring about risk management and how it's going to affect the bottom line of the company. Their job is to take ownership of forecasting what's going to happen to the organization. And cash flow is their number one KPI. Now, they also have cash on hand. They have balance sheets. They have all sorts of tools they're using to figure this out. And it's not your job to know those. Your job is to understand what they care about.
Yes.
So that you can be prepared to answer questions around, okay, would it be easier to pay this in a lump sum, or would it be easier to pay it month to month? Because we can build this up as a grant for E-rate if you're a private school, or we can build this up as something that you pay month to month. What's easier for your organization to digest? And the CFO can then say, you know what, risk tolerance wise, we have a couple of donors. We wouldn't be able to buy into the project until March of next year. But if we can type this up right now as a proposal, we could probably get in front of them in February and have this approved by next year.
Yep. Well, and this is a great.
It saves everybody time. And that's the CFO's job. Your job is to answer their questions.
And this is a conversation that many of you are already familiar with. You go to a customer, they've got a dozen machines that need to be upgraded desperately. And, it's a big bundle. Maybe they're high-end machines or whatever. And the price tag is, fairly significant. And the client looks at it and goes, man, that's just a hard pill to swallow. Now, your inbox is full from all your various vendors of someone trying to get you on some sort of lease or hardware as a service sort of program. That's a great opportunity, because now you can go to that customer and say, hey, rather than paying this one lump fee and you're telling me you're having, that's the big problem is you have to pay it all at once. I've got a plan over here that will spread this out over 36 months or whatever it is. And when you do those, remember that's you're providing a value in how you spread those out. So there's a great opportunity to increase your margins and provide a different way to do that. And the client's happy. They may know, they may clearly see it in everything they've got sitting, all those piles that, they were sitting there. They may be able to clearly see that it is in the long run costing them more, but it solves problems for them right now, which enables their business to go and do things.
Yeah.
If you can solve their problems and enable their business, it doesn't really matter what the cost is.
Yeah. And I'm trying to prep everybody on this podcast to understand that when you walk in with a quote in hand and say, I want to see the CFO, the CFO is not going to give you time. He's going to give you to one of his accountants, because the accountants are the ones in charge of quotes. The CFO wants to talk to you about risk management. I've said this a couple times in the podcast so far. CFO wants to know about risk management. They want to know about profit margins. They want to understand what's driving risk in their company and what's driving profitability in their company. They use accounting to understand that. In a proper situation where the roles and responsibilities are defined, where you have a full-time CFO, they're leveraging the accounting department to help them understand. Now, just like in engineering, there are some people who are a little bit more linear thinkers than others. Like they're an engineer, but they're still doing PC repair and stuff like that. That's fine. But they also understand that they're capable of a lot more. And they just can't wait for the day where they can shirk all this responsibility off onto a tier one tech. The CFO may be doing the accounting, maybe doing the financial analysis as one role, and that's good. But in the end, if you want to resonate with their brain, you got to talk at that engineering level, that higher level. So to complete my analogy, if you tier one tech, those are your accountants. Very important. They're handling tickets, they're doing things, and they're receiving advice from at the higher level. Then you have your finance department who is directing and asking the accountants what to do. Those are your engineers. And they're the ones that are directing the bigger picture and okay, where can we spend? What kind of budgets can we have? What is being profitable? What's costing us? And that gets your left and right hand side accounting is handled at that level. Then at the upper level is the CFO. The CFO is the equivalent of the CIO. Their job is to determine direction. Where do we want to invest? Why do we want to invest there? What's going to help the company? And if you're not speaking that language as an IT person, if you're one to talk to a CFO, then you as an IT person need to present them, hey, we see there's a lot of risk being absorbed over here because you got a lot of depreciating assets. Don't talk about warranty. Talk about depreciating assets. Your risk is increasing every year. If we don't take care of this, you're going to start losing man hours and you're going to start causing inefficiencies in your operations. We need to take care of these assets. That's what they want to talk about. They don't care about what asset it is. They don't care about what it costs at that point. What they care about is identifying the risk. Then they can drive back to you and say, okay, what does it cost to mitigate that risk? Like, tell you what, let me go back and find out. Then you can come back with a quote. Once they've identified and helped you scope out what the problem is they're wanting to get rid of, like, hey, can we just get rid of the ones that are like over 6 years old? Yeah, we'll start there. So now you guys are negotiating. They don't care what you're doing other than mitigating the risk. Now you've got the CFO's ear, and you will keep the ear. And sometimes they'll bring in the CEO, say, okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a bigger project here. We all need to get on the same grounds on. Let's talk this through. Now you're in a CIO role officially. It'll be a good feeling because you're talking about risk management, strategy, all as a group. You're not talking about dollars and cents quite yet. You might spitball some numbers. You might propose like, it's going to cost about $10,000 to do all this. I won't know until I get a quote. And then the CEO and the CFO are going to be like, okay, well, the risk to the company is like $30,000. So what's the likelihood of this? And now you're starting to wear a CISO role a little bit. And you're talking it through. And this is how executive conversations go. They don't talk about the assets. They don't talk about that. They talk about risk. And each one of them has their area of risk they're trying to define. So the CFO persona, it's a chief financial officer. Their risk persona is going to be looking at the finance of the company, the profitability of the company, and they're going to be reporting that to CEO. You as a CIO, your part in that is helping them understand the risk that is happening within the IT world. And if there are any solutions there that might help them mitigate risk. If there's a better solution out there than what they have, maybe it's more expensive, but it helps them mitigate a bigger risk. Those are the things you need to bring to the table. If you want to earn the CFO's time, you've got to talk like that. You cannot talk speeds, fees, and tickets unless that CFO is also doing all the accounting.
Right.
And don't even care.
Yeah. And so to kind of wrap up on this, don't get wrapped up in the dollars and cents of a finance discussion. Yeah. That's a weird statement, but don't do that, because it's not always just about how much it is. It's what you can do with it. And if you need to work on the price, you will. But when you can position that solution, that service, and the CFO understands that, all right? They're not just there to try to get the cheapest price on everything. That's a waste of their time. They want to get the best value for everything. That would be the ultimate CFO's goal.
They want to make sure that when they spend this $40,000, it's going to grow the company or mitigate some risk. Just like Skip's earlier analogy with the consultant. It may make sense to you in your scope of work that we need to hire this engineer. To the CFO, they're going to put that in context and say, no, thanks for bringing it to my attention, though. Because sometime it might have been the best decision. And then that's what we're here to do, is we're here to bring information to the CFO, to the CEO, to the CISO, as the CIO, that they can help make decisions on, because they're smart people. They want to drive their company forward, and they don't like being bogged down with operational data. When you say, hey, PCs are breaking or we need to work on patch schedules, no, they don't care about that. Yeah. They care about you bringing things to their table that are important. Now, every once in a while, you'll talk about those operational things, and that's okay. But when they see Skip coming to their door, Skip's going to be on site next week. They go, I need to get some time with that guy because I need to ask him some questions like, how are we handling this ChatGPT thing? Is it going to affect our business at all? I've had people asking me about that. They know that they can rely on me to give high-level advice. And so you want to be seen as that person. But if you're not bringing this level of conversation to the table, the CFO is not going to care what you say. If you get a level 1 tech who's constantly bugging you about low-end things and never looking at the bigger picture, you're not going to value them as much or see them as a promotable into an engineer role. And maybe that's okay. But if you're an engineer or you're the owner of your MSP and you've got a level one tech who always looks at things at level one, they only care about PCs. They're never thinking about the bigger architecture of the environment. You're not going to invite them to the table to help you make decisions. But if you get that really bright shining star who's spending their time like saying, hey, you know what? If we were to do these three things, it would help the engineers out a lot. That's the person I want to watch. That's the person I'm going to start inviting to my table that's helping me be more efficient in the environment and coming with bright ideas. You need to do the same thing to the CFO. You need to show them that you care about the risk of their organization, that you're going to help them streamline or create strategy that's going to drive the company forward using technology. They don't care what the technology is. They care what the solutions are that you bring to the table, just like the CEO. And your job is not to think for them. Your job is to present them with risks that they can then decision off of. And then you work together to find a solution. And you take that solution back and you form a quote. CFOs are not what you think, guys.
No, not at all.
We kind of like reiterated, but it's a complicated thing. And we want to like mentioned several times in here that CFOs are about risk management and strategic offerings. That's what they care about. They just happen to look at the financial lens. Just like you care about risk management and finance at your company, you see it through a technology lens.
Yeah. A different lens. Yes,
it's a different
absolutely.
persona. Thank you, Skip. I know you have other places to be, so I'm going to let you go, and we will be back on track for podcasts on a weekly basis going forward as long as nothing crazy happens. Take care, everyone. We'll see you next week.
No chance of that. Thanks, everyone.